Hi, it's Lee-san. So last week I posted a video about Authority Nutrition that Authority Nutrition shared on his Facebook page, and I got so many comments on it, especially by people who are following a low-carb diet. Then People Sucks responded and said, "And you just pointed out the issue with high-carb diets. A normal amount of carbs results in calorie deficit. A high-carb diet doesn't provide enough caloric intake, forcing the eater to consume more and more carbs just to fulfill calorie requirements. All the scientific literature is very clear about this inducing de novo lipogenesis, and thus increasing triglycerides with increased carbohydrate intake. You need to stop referring to people to doctors with an agenda." McDougall holds no credibility, as the organization he leads masquerades as a physicians group, while clearly being anything but. The unbiased, scientific, peer-reviewed literature all states that increased carbohydrate increases de novo lipogenesis and triglyceride concentration. That is fairly indisputable. Every time a high-carb, low-fat diet is put up against a low-carb, high-fat or protein diet, the low-carb diet always wins out in terms of weight loss, increases in HDL, lowering of triglycerides. Stop referring to doctors with an agenda for information. They will only continue to justify what you feel is correct, despite the evidence being quite the opposite. Continuing to increase carbohydrates and subsequently lowering fat only results in negative consequences systematically. I have posted the peer-reviewed literature repeatedly, yet you keep referring back to groups with an agenda. And my response to that was, "People sucks. I think in the end everyone is biased, but you have to look at the information. You linked me a study funded by the egg industry, and you complained that I'm linking people to studies that may have support from animal rights organizations, but mostly not. But that aside, it's true that triglycerides can be elevated in people consuming high fruit diets, but these people also tend to have very low cholesterol, so a low HDL and high triglycerides is not as relevant as people think. If people want to lower triglycerides, then a starch-based diet will be fine. Not one study shows that fruit consumption causes diabetes or heart disease. All the studies done showing harmful effects do not use fruit. And if you really want to go by the studies you cited, then fine. The second study you cited was about overfeeding with glucose or sucrose. I don't know how you came to your conclusion about high-carb vegan diets being harmful when this is what the study was about." So in the article that People Sucks linked, it says, during overfeeding, subjects were given an average of about 1,400 grams of carbohydrate and oxidized about 1,300 grams, which resulted in a mean carbohydrate balance of about 115 grams. De novo lipogenesis contribution was clearly a tiny proportion. Regardless of which dietary manipulations have been considered to date, excess energy or excess carbohydrate in lean or obese subjects, or in men or women, the amount of de novo lipogenesis measured still represents a minor fraction of the disposal of dietary carbohydrate. So the people in this study were not eating 500 grams of carbs per day. They were eating about 1.4 kilograms of carbs, and even so, de novo lipogenesis was only a minor fraction of the disposal of carbohydrate. So what does this mean for people who are eating less than 1.4 kilograms of carbohydrate a day? The findings of that study do not apply to a regular high-carb vegan diet, where calorie requirements are met and not highly exceeded as in that study. If heart disease, metabolic damage, and diabetes were a result of a high-carb vegan diet, we wouldn't see people reversing their diabetes and losing body fat through any of the high-carb plant-based doctors' programs. We also wouldn't see such good blood test results on those channels that I mentioned. The top nutritional experts and health organizations in the world recommend a vegan diet, or at least heavily plant-based, including Dr. Kim A. Williams. Remember that the meat, egg, and dairy industries, as well as junk food and pharmaceutical companies, also have influence on some scientific studies because they have so much money and power. It's not as easy to get funding for vegan or vegetarian studies. Then I just stated something that I have stated previously in another video about Dr. Garth Davis. I said that the misinformation and ridicule of vegans spread by Chris Gunners and similar makes me concerned. And I linked my video about Dr. Garth Davis. So in conclusion, this is what I want to say. I do not personally recommend getting calories from refined sugar as a bulk of the diet. Also, carbs do not get turned to fat as easily as people think. It is more likely that if a person is gaining weight on a high-carb diet, they have either come from a past of calorie or carb restriction, and their metabolism is slowed down from their past dieting, or they are massively overeating and sedentary, or they are eating a high-fat food or they are eating high fat foods in addition to the high carb foods. I recommend a whole food plant-based diet. Added sugar is not as harmful as we think, provided it is added to high fiber foods such as fruit, but get your calories from fruits and starches. Also, low carb may be better than a standard American diet, but it is not a long-term solution. Those on low carb diets can damage their hormonal and metabolic health. It is particularly concerning if the low carb diet is highly based on animal source foods, which have been shown to be strongly correlated to heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. So let me know your thoughts and comments. Feel free to go over to my previous video to answer some of the people who have criticized my information. And I'd love to hear from you. So see you in my next video. Bye.